itemization, really making great use of that from easy. Obviously, Benson was able to kind of clutch it out because the itemization on the Rise wasn't necessarily perfect. But I feel like it's something we need to see kind of come into the mix here. We also haven't seen the Fiora Gwen stuff really have success because it's so dependent on that also scary 4-2 roll down.
We are finally loading in EMEA, Karmine Corp, 3 different EMEA champions on this roster alongside Wet Jungler, which is, it seems like I'm excluding him from greatness. Not the case at all. Believe me, Wet Jungler is an absolute demon on the conversions. Portals are here. Trainer Golems is an option. Artifact Anvil, 3 champions. Clearly, our players are excited to be here, excited to be playing each other, excited to be, you know, just in the presence of a tournament like this, the opportunity to play some of the best players in the world, players I'm sure they all respect each other very, very much. It will be 3 champions in the end.
And one of the most important questions that we kind of was waiting for all throughout this week leading up to this was which little legends was Vitality going to pick? And it seems like Toronto Tokyo said, I don't want all that Mold Diver nonsense, but we are going to get into the game here now, and I'm super excited to see where this is going to take us.
Of course, a lot of the, there's not just one elephant, there's many elephants in the room when it comes to the meta. Syndra, definitely one of them. Cassidy, we've seen a lot of. Robin spoke about a little bit at the end of that interview off of the 2-0 win for Toronto Ultra. It comes down to a tempo game plan, staying very healthy. We saw how important it is to preserve HP in this 4v4 format. It's not all about building the best board and winning out, because you end up facing your teammates, and if you have low HP, you can't really secure that first and second that are so important for winning matches. Equally so, not going 8th is incredibly important. If you're going to lose streak stage 2, that's fine, but you better have a very good plan to stabilize in stage 3 and 4.
Yeah, and we saw like kind of one of those bigger examples of that in the Cedar Division series, where Tidal had an incredible spot where you have my bow, he could have gone down that route, slammed Nash's race play Syndra, but opted against that because other people on his team had an even better spot for that composition.
Soju right away starting off with a Blitzcrank 2, in my opinion, one of the sturdiest, most reliable tanks in stage 2. Itemize him, he buys you so much time. He's great with Mogul's Mill, for example. I think an artifact we haven't seen enough of today compared to how much I see it on ladder, for example. It is an absolute demonic way to make it to 9, to preserve just, again, so much HP and make so much gold in stages 2 and 3.
I mean, I've had it found me 50 gold plus over the course of the game, right? It's so insane. Right, again, but we've seen a lot of Gambler's Blade being picked up instead, right? Really prioritizing that shift with the attack speed focus on the Syndra line, really being facilitated by that. But we do have our gold augments here on double 61, one of the best lose streak players in the world.
Don't do it, double.
After the fortune favors the bold here. And I do think that in the 4-4 format, this augment definitely is something we need to not really look at.
One thing to make note of, he has Learning to Spell, maybe one of the augments that I would consider for a Zoe reroll line alongside Spellblades. He has 4 Zoes as well popping in the shop. He just sold 2 Lilias in the presence, in the product of making this Rumble purchase before we moved on to the 2-1 round. So maybe not going to consider it. He also has a Syndra in the shop, so maybe the better, easier route. That being said, the items are not ideal for the Syndra cast just yet. I think Double has to really look at loose streaking to find a tier. Not going to be easy though when you've leveled to 4, when you have a Zoe 2, which is, I think, just a really, really great unit at killing off units, especially in this stage 2.
Yeah, do you think you should just commit to the win streak? You slam the Stoneblade here, coming through right at this very moment here, going up against Soju, who's going more down the key boost route here, David. An augment that we in the past is really, we really connected towards some of the more melee-centric AD lines here, but what makes it so good right now?
It's the Cassidy. Cassidy multi-strikers, they really benefit from the extra armor, similar to Duelists in past. They're kind of a trade that's, I think, falling down that same line in terms of what you build, what you want to do for that trade. The whole team wants more stats to kind of scale into the fight, especially in the early game, where it's really a tempo trade. And that will be the case for Soju. We saw there, has already the Jax, has the 2 Ashes on the bench. We'll be looking to play a stronger board there with the Fairy in, but we'll definitely be moving into the, I think, Cassidy as soon as he finds a spot for it. Just the best way to play keepers, in my opinion. And we're seeing already some Syndra. Setsuko has the Rageblade already built. BIS, one of the BIS items alongside Shojin and Nashers. Yeah, very important to note as well here. Stayed off the level 4 level on 2-1 to see the outcome of his first fight here. One that now already knows that he can kind of start playing towards that win streak. A good setup with the pairs on the Elise here, the pair on the Nyla as well. If you find those upgrades, remember Eldritch also scales off of the star level of the champion in terms of the summon, so that's really important. And as I mentioned before in the Series 2 cast, Syndra, all she wants to do is really get as many casts as possible. You want a frontline that can stall. Doesn't matter what frontline, you can really mix and match. We saw at the end of that game with Michael, he was playing a Shapeshifter frontline, which we saw a little bit less of throughout this tournament. It's more the Vanguard at the main line, but really anything that buys time for Syndra, A-okay.
Do you think that it comes down to the fact that the Vanguard line kind of caps out higher? Is it easier to hit a what? Because like I feel like the shapeshifter, when you get like those 3-star Swains, 3-star Negos online, that's such a powerful front line to work with.
I've never felt it really feels that sturdy, in my opinion. I think also the Nami adds so much with the Mage. It fits well with the Eldritch. You have you know, the Chrono later with the Karma. I think Cassiopeia falls off a cliff after stage 3, if you don't itemize her especially. I think 3-starring her is a bit of a bait, whereas Karma, well, we know what Karma does in terms of healing especially. Even without items, she offers that % healing, which is really important when you want to stall for Syndra. So it just, I think, fits much better. It makes it more cohesive as a game plan coming to stage 4.
Yeah, and also something that's worth noting here, right? We saw Toronto with that very early Tristana 2 off the back of that trade sector here, able to hold the rolls back, but he lost his 2-1 fight to that support golem. Just really showing the level that they have, these support goals. Like they're so powerful, they're so hard to deal with, and even though some of them might fall off a little bit into the later stage of the game, having that extra unit in the early game is so powerful.
And for Toronto, looks like it will probably be a Kog'Maw game right now, holding the Tristana, holding the Rumbles, has the Sunfire already slammed, has a DF sword open, great AD item, of course, for Shojin and IE later on in the game for the Kog'Maw. We've seen Kog'Maw have mixed results. I think a lot of players did low roll a tiny bit. We saw so many times, 1 off Kog'Maw, 2 off Kog'Maw, hitting, you know, late in stage 4. I do think it's a very, very good comp, and in this 4v4 format, where the meta is relatively solid for 2-cost rerolls, I think someone has to play Kog'Maw, or at least contest it to stay relevant in a game like this.
Yeah, so Double here picking up a Wukong with a bow, right, getting those AP items in there, but Wukong has also been one of the stronger frontliners if you can kind of play for him, right? But the thing about Wukong is that you need to have multiple copies of Wukong heading into around that 4-1 point, because it's not a unit you're going to be actively, aggressively rolling for here, right? So you really need to have a reason to go down that route for the front line.
Looking at the setups there at the bottom, Dark Hydra seems to also be going into this Kassadin line, has a support golem, extra body, buying time, extra support item, you know, helping out the entire team as well. And overall, we saw one interesting game plan from Cambiz with Spoils of War and a Vigar for now, but there was also a Syndra there. I think most likely going to be a Syndra game from Cambiz in this case. Yeah, and also it's worth noting, right, that Double and Cambiz is the first time they're ever allowed to kind of play together in a tournament. Like they've shared all their prep all throughout history, right? And so many times we've gotten so close to see them both at set championships in those finals, and we finally got to see them both here, like last times. This could be a Vigar game actually. The Syndra's not actually on the board, which I think is a big indicator of, hey, I'm not playing Syndra because you're missing out on the scaling nature of her abilities. And we have an early Vex and an early Vigar. This is, I think, the only setup I would play Vigar from is when you have this very easy way to play into it. You know you want to buy the charm early, you know you're committing to the game plan so you can try and scale as much as possible, and you have an alternate path that doesn't contest your teammates in terms of a viable reroll that leaves you open to maybe hold other units and grief other players.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth noting, right, on ladder, Vega is really complicated by the fact that there are so many people trying to play this Kog'Maw reroll line. So all of your units, it's kind of the same call, like they're so contested. Here you're much more reliably going to hit that Rumble, going to hit that Noon on the front line to really buy your time for your Vega to do his work.
The best part is that you're really relying on the Vex to be your main front line, so you don't need the Nunu 3, you don't need the Honeymancer units to really come online, but you can still hold them and make so if an opposing player is playing Kog'Maw, he's going to have a harder time hitting. So I really like the game plan overall from most players. I think pretty clearly going into specific lines already, not going to be playing for tempo game plans in terms of leveling to 8, instead going to be going down the 2-cost reroll lines and trying to maximize and optimize your chances of hitting these units while griefing the opponents as well.
Yeah, and also it's worth noting here, pretty much every single player in this game are part of the old school TFT crowd. The people that kind of, I say grew up, that sounds weird, like grew up with like the really big flex mindset. Like again, with playing without setting against playing all you have to think like, again, someone like Dark Hydra, when he won his championship in EMEA, he was also a player that really played a lot of flexible styles in a meta that was really rampant with like forces of various compositions. And that's also something that really like complicated the practice group that he was in before as well, like really focusing on that like flex style.
And right away we see Rageblade. Why is one of the best items in the game? It can reflect into so many different reroll comps. Kassadin, sure. Syndra, sure. Kog'Maw, okay, passable.
Jinx.
I'll accept it. Jinx, sure. You can be a better holder. You can really always then get a charm to remove it off of Kog'Maw and move it on to Jinx later on in the game and have better items for Kog'Maw that are closer to his VIS. So all in all, a very, very good slam. I think Rageblade was always kind of the PB meme of being that item that everyone slammed because it just scales so well into long fights. But in this current meta, actually, it is one of the better items to build no matter what.
Yeah, even like compositions like Karma can make great use of as well, right? It goes on to Callista Flex, it can be flexed onto a Rise if you're playing a Rise as well. So like, it is one of the most versatile items, and I think that the game itself is like really benefits from Rageblade being a single item.
For now, looking at the win streakers, Dark Hydra from Karmine Corp and Toronto Tokyo from Vitality are currently in the HP lead. It's only Dark Hydra that has a 5 win streak, the 100 HP to work with. Big upgrade for Double in terms of buying time for this Syndra to scale. All in all, only one Syndra and pretty awkward items. I talked about it. If you're not lose streaking stage 2, you have no one to blame but yourself if you don't find at least one BIS item for Syndra early. So this 3-2 augment could be very important for Double. If you find something like a big grab back, for example, you can find a few more components, maybe make a lot of these good components work with kind of their complementary component that are missing. For example, the Rageblade can be built here, the Shojin, if you find a tier.
Even something like Pandora's items we've seen a lot of today as well, because you can kind of like, you can get your teammates to sack fights if you need to buy time to find that BIS. So a lot of options you're talking about here, and also with the Carousel coming up, it's pretty much guaranteed he will have priority there.
And Soju slams the double attack speed on Kassadin, really playing high tempo, similar to what Robin mentioned. Doesn't have healing on Kassadin. He knows it's not correct, but he knows also that if he slams the items, Kassadin can do a lot of work in stage 3, and just the HP you save, with the chance of removers later on in the game and moving on the Rageblade to something like Callista, for example, makes it worth it.
Yeah, we are going to be going here into the silver augments, and kind of just to grab your point of what you're talking about here. Avoiding going 8th is such a big deal about like the entire format here, and with the way the Campus and Doppler playing out their game, there's a very high likelihood that one of them will go 8th here. So Soju kind of saying, you know what, it's not going to win me the game, but it might get me a 6th. Big
roll down coming through. Sinister deal, taken, deal from Soju. Does he find the Kassadin 2? Already rolling down to 20, holding a lot on his bench is true, but still a very deep roll down, not finding that Kassadin upgrade, which I think he needs to find some level of stability. Making sure he has the correct kind of cookie cutter multi-striker board for stage 3. Has a Shen, has a Hecarim, still no Kassadin, finally finds it. Could have used a duplicate, but of course wants to save that to min-max and optimize the chances of finding the first 8 copies of Kassadin, and then finalizing the 3-star with a 9th off the duplicator.
Soju's Carousel priority here will also be really interesting, right? Because he has the option of going for the QSS, has the option of going for the Edge of Might, or even the BT, depending on like which component he wants to get off the Carousel.
The Nashers is, I think, similar to Crown Guard. We've seen items that are not necessarily considered BIS on Kassadin. I'm a big believer of Nashers over Rageblade. I think it scales better into the late game. Overall, when fights are a little bit shorter. But the double attack speed is rare because this essentially means you only have one item slot left. Are you building QSS, or are you building something like a healing item, like BT or Hodge? The one way to bypass this is finding something like a Banshee's Veils, finding a Silver Veil off of your Augment at 4-2 if it is going to be a Silver, and having that anti-CC mechanic in that way.
And that's one of the reasons why we've seen so many different builds of Kassadin all throughout today, right? Because we have had those augments come out, we have had the Banshees Veils, the silver ones as well, right? So we'll have to see here Toronto Tokyo, David. Kind of like talk me through this composition, because right now it seems like we're still holding items onto the Tristana.
I think overall, you're closer to the Tristana over the Kog'Maw. I see a lot of players at EWC favoring the Tristana build. I personally like playing Jinx if I find the 2-star Jinx and bypassing Tristana altogether and playing around vertical Arcana as a way to cap this comp with the DR and the AD off of the Hecarim Arcana. All in all, most players here are favoring the higher tempo game plan, which I think spikes earlier and harder, which is the Tristana, because HP preservation matters a little bit more than having a higher cap in stage 4.
So it's also worth noting here, right? You talked a lot about spell-based augment here coming through, and we can see here Casey, Wet Jungler, really making great use of that, and with the Surge, which is like my favorite early game unit. She is so incredibly powerful, and she holds pretty much any single item in the game very well as well.
I had a media day yesterday with actually both of these teams. That's why I wanted to cast this series specifically with the Karmine Corp team minus Double and the Vitality team minus Soju. And speaking to Karmine Corp, I think Jungler mentioned specifically he likes Zoe reroll only if he's given Zoe Spellblade. I think in this case it might still be a Karma game plan instead, but definitely I think the one reason you would be playing Zoe and feel really comfortable about it in a setting like this.
So we can kind of get the overview of the game going on. No outrageous pickups
to get
here,
that BIS. For Double, also Pandora's, as you mentioned, so does have a way to fix those components he had and finds that BIS on the Syndra. We're seeing a lot of keepers overall for all the Kassadin players, so all in all, I think there's not really a player that can complain too much. Those that needed to correct their item components have done so through Pandora's. Those who just needed to find more stability with combat augments have found them as well for their reroll comps.
Now, important thing to note here as well, with Pandora's items being in the mix.
That's a lot of Gallios.
It definitely is a lot of Gallios here, but also a big loss streak for the likes of double 61. I feel like he would rather have a Syndra 2. There it is coming through. But as I was talking about here for double specifically, he can much more actively grieve good components away from the enemy team because he's going to be able to pick up them up and then re-roll them into another item.
It's also an early Karma here for double. Doesn't have Chrono in just yet, so not as impactful, but it is still Karma. There is still % healing. You are still helping that Blitz tank just a tiny bit longer. I guess doesn't want to slam the chain on the Blitz because he wants to try and find that tier high roll off of the roll on the Pandoras to try and finalize the Shojin on the Syndra. Syndra, you need to have BIS as soon as possible because she scales, she'll cast more often, and overall you'll have a much higher cap as we've seen from all the different series today.
Also, OKH business fight here coming through from the likes of the KC boys. Would have probably liked Wet Jungle to take the win, but another thing is also worth noting there in the whole scope of playing for reroll versus playing for forecast. Reroll compositions will very often be much more reliant on the BIS. Cambiz
finally finds the Veigar 2, still has not found the Vex 2, and this is why we're seeing a 7 loss, because I think the danger, you're playing Spoils of War especially, you have to hit an early spike to then regain your economy off of the spoils kills, off of the extra gold. It's not looking good now, so do take it a peek saying, oh, this guy might be a little bit doomed. We'll see if Cambiz can salvage this. If not, he will go Grief Man mode, start scouting the players who are lower in HP from the opposite team for Vitality, and trying to hold their units and hope that they go 8th and Cambiz can maybe salvage a 7th, a 6th, maybe even a 5th.
Yeah, we can see here, we got the question answered, David. It's going to be the priority of the healing over the CC slash aggro reduction here. So I think this is, for the most part, like the catch-all correct fight.
As a Castellan enjoyer, let's say enjoyer instead of forcer, I do think tempo is king.
Who is your most favorite composition here? Is it going to be Castellan or the old Talon? Like which two cards reroll do you feel the most attached to?
It's Castellan. I played. Yeah, I'm not going to answer the question, but a lot of Castellan. This set, some EU players maybe don't like me very much, but that is what it is. On the grind to get to those snapshots, and it is what it is in a tournament like this as well, where a lot is at stake here. You want to have the best chance possible of preserving HP, because we've seen so many situations, like we saw with the T1 game, where at the very end, you can be very strong, you can have the 2 strongest boards, but if you're at 1 single life, when you face your teammate, 1 player's going to get knocked out, unless you find Desperate Plea, like we saw in the T1 series.
Which ended up winning them that series overall. So like, again, these charms here, some of them are very low impact, some of them are very big impact here. As you can see, Milk now with that Karma online with a very interesting item set.
Fiora should be bought, I imagine, isn't purchased at all from Milk here.
And it makes sense, right? Obviously he does have the Pandora's items, but he doesn't have a slammable item for the Fiora right now. And she's such a difficult unit to keep alive, so if you don't have those items for her, she is going to be a liability on your board for a while at this point.
I mean, you have a Gwen pair, you're looking at Warrior. I think if you're looking at, I mean, you have a Lilia still on your board, for example. There's a Camille, it is a 4 Chrono setup here instead. Interesting not picking up the Fiora from Milk. I think overall, the 4 cost flex on Karma, so many players have so many different variations they think are best. Talking to Alan ZQ, for example, a player from Z10, he has a wildly different, best level 9 Karma board compared to most players I've seen on ladder and this tournament.
Yeah, like the big question starts with, do you play 2 or 4 Chrono? Then from there, do you play Callista? Do you play Fiora? Do you play Rise? What do you play?
Play that much.
But let's look at this here as well. Like, it's definitely going to be some interesting fights here coming through on the scope of the things here, right? Dark Hydra's win streak has kind of been broken at some point throughout this game, but again, he's playing that very high tempo opener, trying to be one of the players that bleed out into 4th.
Big win for the Veigar, big win for Cambiz here as well, who needed to not only win to preserve HP, but has to send hopefully someone from Vitality in that 8th place position that he was angling towards already, and also the spoils will matter so much. We're seeing Heroic Grab back potentially being a possibility, always a viable option in this reroll meta. In most metas in TFT, it's not strong enough in terms of the value you get from it, but you already have 1 duplicator, you're now finding 2 more. We talked about playing high tempo, playing to preserve HP immediately, not playing for high cap, and this augment choice is exactly what that gives you.
Yeah, and the big issue here, though, is that it leaves us without a single combat augment to work with. That Spoils of War will give you items somewhere along the way here. The continuous scaling of the Veigar ability will be big for these late-game fights, but you do not have any of those big ones here.
We see the augments there above the player. Absolutely beautiful to see that there in person on the stage off of the augmented reality. And absolutely beautiful to see Cambiz as well with a viable way to win a lot of fights in this stage 4. The Veigar 3 is online. This is BIS Veigar for anyone wondering. You want to have both the Shojin and the blue buff.
Yeah, and for a long time that was actually a debate, right? You could get Nashus in there, but now with the way that we bank mana now without it going into the Eva, like having this is very very good, but the issue is it's so hard to get free tiers to work with.
And similar to Syndra, this is a scaling comp. As you buy more charms, this Vigar will get stronger, will get more AP, which then crits on the JG in particular. So this is a comp that can get much stronger, which is why I think you don't rely on the scaling and the high cap nature of the augments. Instead, you rely on the kit of the unit itself.
And another thing to note is we do have the overlay up, right? We can see there's so much, so many players here that are on very low economies trying to hit their rerolls. This gives Camus a great advantage here. So you're going to make his charge up the table. Fiora
is found here once again, and for Milk, 7 loss streak. This is, I think, one of the reasons why Karma Flex has been played less and less. It's a very expensive composition with the way the 4-cost bag currently works and very few players playing for 4-cost. It's usually very hard to find your 2-stars. If you only have a Fiora 1, a Gwen 1, a Rakan 1, etc., you start losing a lot of fights to all these reroll players that are starting to spike, like Canvas, for example.
Yeah, you can kind of see he's kind of forced into holding a variety of frontliners that have not been upgraded, like holding on, praying for that Nasa to come free and come through and be upgraded here, which would be a huge spike for this board state here. Going up against his teammate here in Toronto, Tokyo, who's also struggling to hit David.
Looking at the HP totals, we talked about Bintum being the face of that T1 team, the hero, and looks like Soju's going to take that mantle coming into this series number 4. He's currently on a massive 9 win streak, 80 HP. He's saying, you know what, guys, I got the first place, just trying to finish in the top 4.
There is a Milio with a bow on the Carousel, David. One of the most sought after 5-cost to get that, get that cap going.
Trying to block, trying to make sure that Canvas can't pick up the Milio, and Canvas forces him to pick it up. Maybe he didn't want it, he just wanted to deny it instead. So many mind games on the Carousel. This is the extra layer of strategy we're talking about when it comes to 4v4 compared to individual TFT. And anything that makes TFT complex, I'm a big fan of because it makes it a much, much funner viewing experience.
And looking at the HP totals right now here as well, there are some small alarm bells kind of ringing out for the Vitality boys, right? They've kind of missed on a lot of their reroll conversation. We saw Milk kind of struggling to get this 4-cost conversation kind of fitted out, right? And again, Wet Jungler, Dark Hydra, Soju, all kind of rising above that fight for now.
We talk about Syndra reroll and not having to do Syndra reroll. Now we're seeing Zoe not having to be rerolled. A 2-star Zoe carrying Wet Jungler. He's incredibly healthy while using so much of his gold to hold Kog'Maw to make life harder for the opposing team's Kog'Maw players. So really great team play it looks like here from Karmine Corp. We're seeing there is no Kog'Maw 3 yet on the opposing side for Team Vitality. Looking at the setup here for the Kassadin, we talked about it. Tempo is king, and we're seeing why here. It's a 9 win streak off of a slam that is not considered BIS by any means, but it makes it how this Kassadin is a 1v9 all-star all throughout stage 3 and 4 until the maybe bigger CC comes in stage 5 with Nami, with a lot of the legendaries coming online.
So again, two big fights here as well. The Vigar does manage to clean up here. A very good handshake fight here as well between the two KC players. That is going to be very big as well.
And I love the players are sticking to the nice organization. Reroll units on the left, griefing units on the right. Makes it much better for casters to pick up on what's going on each of these boards.
So a Morello being the third item of choice here for Setsuko on this Syndra. Definitely not a BIS unit by any stretch of the imagination here, but we do see Toronto Tokyo find those free-star frontliners, but David, the damage not quite there just yet.
And really great play from Karmine Corp in terms of griefing. We saw so many Tristanas and Kog'Maws being held by both Wet Jungler and Dark Hydra. We're seeing the effect of this. 5 loss streak, you can't hit if you're Toronto Tokyo. You hit the Nunu great, he has no items. It's not really as impactful, and you're forced to have built a Hodge here on Kog'Maw, which is definitely not ideal.
Now looking at this fight here, it's going to be very interesting to see how this actually is going to unfold with the Karma one in the backline. Getting bought so much time. Again, the Moonstone Renewer, I wanted to talk about before, and we saw Wet Jungler's board. One of the best scaling support items in the entire game. That continuous healing coming through
big
is
here.
Amazing.
And you get the good stun. Doesn't matter, there's so many units still left alive, and the one-kill, one-shot nature of Tristana makes it that she's just too slow to clean up that fight in the end. Wet Jungler we see now has finally moved off of the Zoe. She has expired as a 1-cost, 2-star carry at the end of this stage 4. But look at the HP total, so much health coming out from Wet Jungler and Dark Hydra, and double as well with just Soju on his lonesome at the very tippity top, 80 HP, 11 win streak. He needs his team to really clutch up in stage 5. Make sure they can find their way into that top 4.
There's something to note here, right? With Setsuko didn't activate mentorship on the previous round. Again, we don't know if that's a misplay, but we can kind of make the assumption that that was because he didn't want to deal obscene amount of damage to a teammate potentially because of that Syndra free spike.
And we're seeing from Setsuko, he has a shapeshifter variant of Syndra, and as he said, as I mentioned before, all these different variants can work. We're seeing from from Toronto Tokyo used up all his gold. Has a Soraka 1, unfortunately, on the board. At the very least, it is Sugarcraft here for the Rumble. And this combination of artifacts, I'm not entirely sure. RFC just for the attack speed. Okay, instead going to go for an item for Nunu. I think this makes sense. It is a 3-star. You want to buy more time instead of having more damage in the Kog'Maw. Yeah,
I think it was very clear he was looking for a frontline item to buy the time as you're talking about here. Had to go with the Seeker's Arm God, not an amazing one because it scales over the course of the fight. And Nunu in the current state of the board here will probably be one of the first units to go down.
Milk, 3-win streak has turned it around. The end of stage 4. Is it going to be enough? Is this Nash going to survive for enough? Very good items, but this is a Syndra we're talking about, and it's a teammate we're talking about as well. It's Setsuko versus Milk. The overall team HP will be going down in a big way. At the very least, you have to hope for a clean, small loss. It's not the case, but at least Setsuko stays alive. This gives him agency to still hold units, to grief players, to have one more chance to maybe win a few more fights against Karmine Corp players, especially if the matchmaking is in his favor.
You can see here now we're talking about the fact that Canvas would be one of the players that are currently in that bracket here, and if Setsuko can somehow find a way to avoid going 8th here, and Canvas will take another loss. We talked about how this will be a temporary spike with that Vega, with the lack of combat power from the augments. It's going to be such an intense way because it's going to change the entire scope of the game, David.
What jungler? Silver Augment, Pandora's Bench, is an augment that out of nowhere, a little magic trick, you can find a win condition all for yourself, either through a 3-star 4 cost, through an early 2-star 5 cost, or just through extra ways to really maximize the upgrade you got on your board. It's kind of an econ augment as well.
Oh, very big fight here, David. The straight up battle, but the combat charm coming through.
The stun is big. Can the Veigar do enough? The Shyvana gets a little bit of an extra stun as well on the Veigar, but now the Veigar is online. The casting is coming through the JG, critting off of all the extra HP that was acquired through the charm purchase and through the scaling nature. The Nasus is holding on. It's only really down to the Veigar and a few more
Syndra
units.
targeting?
Syndra versus Veigar. The 1v1 Veigar is the champion. The claps come out. Canvas and What Jungler really, I think, they know how important this elimination was. They know how important it is to not go 8th in this 4v4 format. And you can see already the hype. They know the stakes that are involved with a team as good as Vitality on the opposing side.
Yeah, now we're going to see Milk has kind of been able to turn it around. The one of the players now on a 5-win streak, the biggest one in the lobby in its entirety. But the Nora Yumi being found as well, big spike for a mage sport. So much damage coming out of nowhere. This Nora unit, in my opinion, is the most lethal unit overall. Every time I talk to people, like, it's so surprising like how much damage it does. You put any AP item, any mana item on her, and she just does an incredible amount of damage.
This setup from Dark Hydra, the inverted pyramid, keepers online, and just a 2-item casted in 3 for now. We'll see if it'll do enough. Dark Hydra is sitting around the middle of the, actually no, quite high on the standings. There's just a big gap between Soju and Dark Hydra, both casted in players, showcasing really the power of Cassidon as a tempo reroll comp that stays so healthy in the mid game and then starts falling off a tiny bit in the late game. It's going to be a big win for Hydra. Unfortunately, is it big enough to eliminate Cambiz? Is Milk going to win one more fight? The answer is yes. The upgrades on all his board costs are so relevant, and he's facing double as well. So another big chunk, and Cambiz was taken down in 7th. All of a sudden, there's an upswing here for Vitality.
And that just shows the dynamic nature of this format. For a while, they're doomed for Vitality, but all of a sudden, the streaks come in. Like, Milk found that Karma too that was ever so important. And now, Vitality are looking like the team to beat here. So very important Carousel coming through. Every single item pickup here will be crucial to kind of kid out those final few carries.
What Jungler finds a Gargoyle, an extra little bit of tank, a little bit of extra sustain for that Karma comp that he's cooked up, similar to Milk. All of a sudden, 1 life for What Jungler, for double 61, and for Toronto Tokyo. The order in which these players are eliminated can really decide the match outright. If it's Toronto Tokyo, it's going to be very, very grim for Vitality. But with the elimination on Cambiz, if all of a sudden the 2 next eliminated players are both from Carmine Corp, it's GG.
Very big thing to note here as well. Canvas picks up the Salvation Charm here, will be able to kind of look and like redo this entire board, get the items in the right spot, get some of those frontline items working for that Galio, free to do a lot of tanking work.
You do all the items and then you're like, wait, I have a QSS left over. Who do I put this on?
The classic, but going into the front line here and Tristana, you're not going to get hit by any random CC. It could be ever so important as the Galio will be sending everyone into the air alongside some of those other frontliners. A big fight here. We know Syndra 2 is a big unit, big carry here, and the Galio is not taking low just yet.
Is it going to be enough? The Nami ult comes in. This is why this is the best version of Syndra, in my opinion. The CC from Nami always comes in at the right moment. Double big win. And all of a sudden, Toronto Tokyo is eliminated in 6th place position. Double What Jungler and Hydra are on the chopping block. Even Hydra at 16 HP, this could be just one loss.
And it's very scary for them as well because they can't really manipulate in the way they want to. They kind of have to say, all right, boys, who has the best chance of winning out? Because that is still going to be the big thing to keep in mind here. You got to get that first place in just to feel safe.
Karma 2 could be big for double. Hasn't found, doesn't really have the gold to go for it just yet. The matchmaking here is so important. The last fight of stage 5, still not going to be the most damage just yet. It will be double up against Milk. Double has to win this fight to get a much better chance to maybe eliminate Vitality all together in this game, number 1. And it's going to be White Jungler versus Milk and double versus Soju, rather. Soju was very strong in stage 3. Has he hit his cap? Looks like the answer is no, but the Nami comes in. The Akali and the Caster are both Syndra. Syndra gets a cast off, and double takes the win, stays alive. Does White Jungler also do the same? It looks like the answer is going to be no. White Jungler taken down and eliminated by Milk.
That's a big one here as well, right? Again, Nami, you know, that's caught a lot of flack, but we kind of saw her come into her own in that fight. Whenever that wave comes rolling through the entire board, it is such a powerful tool to buy time for the likes of Syndra, by the likes of some of those other backline carries here. But as we do see now, Milk has kind of come around on Fiora. She's finally made it onto the board, David, as that Gwen 2 was brought into the mix here as well, but she is unitemized for the moment.
2 players remain in this top 4, but there's a +2 point differential already from White Jungler leaping over Toronto Tokyo and Cambiz leaping over Setsuko in the bottom 4 standing. So it's really about just trying to send one of these players forth when it comes to Milk or Soju.
Yeah, but it's so difficult though, because with the way matchmaking is going to work here, they're almost going to be guaranteed to tag into each other somewhere along the way. We need to see a desperate play potentially come through. Any upgrade here will be ever so important. Do you go for the Phantom Emblem to get that 7 multis for a singular fight? That is going to be such a huge one to work with as well. Getting that healing in on that healingless Kassadin could make all the difference.
You find the Camille, the answer is going to be no, but you do find a red buff. Could be really big for the Kalista here. You don't have anti-heal right now. That will be the pickup by Hydra. Is that going to be a difference maker? We'll find out as this fight loads up. Who's going to be facing? It will be Soju once again. High tempo player, did he cap too soon? Is he now going to be floundering, losing HP to players that maybe have stronger builds that scale into longer fights, like the Archangels, like the Rageblade? We're seeing right away the Kalista's locking onto the Kassadin on Soju's side. Kassadin's down. Can Akali do it by herself? The answer is no, but Akali is deep in the trenches. It's not enough. Dark Hydra stays alive. Milk takes down double 61.
And that is going to be one of the big things to keep in mind now. Dark Hydra, the one we're going to be looking at, will no longer have that temporary spike from that 7 multi. Still looking for that Camille you were talking so much about, David, to get the Chrono, to get the 7 multis in, to get that double healing set up into the mix here.
He needs to find the Akali, but it's not happening. His augments are really scaling well into the late game. The spite off of the Golem has the Keepers, has the Inspiring Epitaph, which just gets better and better as you add more units to your board, especially for a comp like this.
Yeah, now look at the positioning here as well. The Arcana will probably walk up, take some of that aggro off the corner units for the Kassadin to buy himself even more time to work with, but they will be on the opposite side of the field here, so this Karma will be untouched for a while before this fight really takes off.
Dark Hydra, can he win this once again? The Kalista taking down units one by one now onto the Gwen. The Nash is buying so much time. Such a great tank setup here with the Gargoyles, with the D-Claw. The Kassadin's down. Can the Kalista clean up the Karma by herself? Karma is not a great single target damage there, but it's going to be enough. Dark Hydra taken down. Milk has done it. He was in a tough position early on in stage 4. He had to find his upgrades on all of his forecasts. He did so. He streaked when he needed it most, and Soju did his job. He stayed so healthy in the early game. Even if he lost a few of those pivotal fights in stage 5 and stage 6, he was so healthy it didn't really matter.
I love the way they get up, like work the crowd just a little bit, celebrate that victory, a very important one in one of the biggest matchup of this entire tournament at the opening stage here, right? So I will say, like, we expected fireworks from this game, and already from the start, David, we have had to follow an amazing game with ups and downs here as the Vitality boys are just reeling in the experience here, getting that win. Enjoying that Milk, showcasing that he has those ace abilities that we were talking so much about. Every single player here has. Even Setsuko going out in 8th did a ton of work, and then Toronto Tokyo finishing 6th, not 7th, was such a big deal as well for the overall scale, and it just really showcasing their ability to master a variety of lines.
And really making TFT a true auto battler in these last few fights. Hands off the keyboard from both players. They know they've guaranteed the victory at this point in time, and a very, very important victory, of course, for Karmine Corp. It's a best of 3. There's still a chance to come back in this game 2, force the game 3. And even if you lose that game 2 or that game 3, there's still another match tomorrow that you can win, go into the decider match, and potentially still go into the playoffs on the final day of this 4-day tournament. So all in all, I think the comps that we saw were pretty standard. Vigar was maybe the bigger surprise. Didn't quite work out for Kamiz. I'm not too surprised considering that 1, he went for a lower cap, hitting the duplicator augment, and 2, we saw in stage 3, he had not even hit the Vigar 2 yet. He was still in a Vex 2, for example, so didn't really play or didn't find that tempo line for the Vigar in this case.
No, and again, that's just one of the biggest kind of issues when you play with these free cost rerolls, because again, they remember the Super Bowls, we saw a lot of free cost reroll, but as we've been talking about before, when that free cost pool isn't getting cannibalized, that is going to be a big issue.
And we did see, I think, Kassadin being the real star of the show. Hydra, the highest and the best performing Karmine Corp player on the Kassadin line with, I think, a bit of a higher cap with the triple combat strength augments, Epitaph, Keepers, and the support golem early on in stage 2. And Soju showcasing the power of tempo Kassadin. No QSS, no problem. Yeah,
and we always saw like how big of a spike 7 multis would have been for Hydra Sports. So if you had found a singular Camille on any of those rolls, on any of the carousels.
And the Akali 3. He was missing still that last copy of Akali, which even if he found it earlier in stage 5, could have won and swung, you know, a lot of those fights back in his favor.
And even maybe taking extra HP out of some of the other Vitality players. That's something you don't necessarily think about a lot in traditional game of TFT, but in the 4v4 format, every single bit of chip HP works.
And it's so, so relevant there, Vitality. Now they have the chance to close out this next game. They're a team that I think, in terms of the mental game, they're some of the best in this tournament. I spoke to them in the media day, and Toronto Tokyo and Milk. Toronto Tokyo phrased it in an interesting way. He said they're, I think, emotionless in terms of really not being tilted by anything, in terms of really just looking at the results and being able to stay cool, calm, and collected. And think about what they need to replicate for the next game, what they need to fix or change, especially when it comes to the micro meta of the playstyle of Karmine Corp, what they're going for in terms of rerolls, etc. We're going to go into a very quick break. We'll be coming back in game 2. Don't miss the Dr. Suleiman Al Habib showdown upcoming right now.
You ever wondered how a Hollywood movie is shot? On a Sony. You review it on a Sony. And how do you make that sound epic? You record it on a Sony. Lunch break on a Sony. So why wouldn't you watch it on a Bravia by Sony?
The esports armed cross movement formation at the end. Too cool to see coming out from Team Vitality. I think maybe they just knew they were winning that game one. I'm going to try and force a game two win to close out a 2-0 win following the footsteps of potentially Toronto Ultra. We're seeing now the trophy, the fantastic showcase here in the middle of this magnificent stage. The lighting, the player, just everything screams top-notch professional esports, and I'm here for it.
Absolutely right, David. Again, I know like you are the biggest fan in the world of the esports post. You definitely did like when I had to do it for the cold opener yesterday. You were absolutely eating into that, but there's a bit of a highlight selection here coming through from our previous game. Just really showcasing some of those early game workings and that ever so critical Vigar 3 coming through, but not going to be enough here, and we just see like the culprit of it all, right? The Arcana 3 on the opposite side of the field here, really hampering Hydra's abilities to get there at the end of the game.
And we saw just really the setup in terms of the meta formation for Vitality specifically. They played, in my opinion, the 4 meta comps. Cassidy for Soju, Karma Flex for Milk, Syndra for Setsuko, and Kog'Maw for Toronto Tokyo. And for Karmine Corp, very similar. It's only that Canvas that I think veered off a tiny bit off of that path, playing the Vigar instead of the Kog'Maw. We saw Syndra from Double, from Cassidy, or from Dark Hydra we saw Cassidy, and from Wet Jungler we saw Karma as well, with obviously slightly different results, which is what ended up with the Vitality win in the end. But all in all, I think a pretty standard game of TFT. I think we saw a little bit more spice from the T1 versus Weibo series, for example. I think we saw some more exciting variants of the meta comps. So I hope this game 2 delivers in that sense. I think the storylines are definitely here. I think the nail-biter aspect at the very end was there, but I want to see, some Zoe reroll. I want to see some, what else, Guido? What is there that you haven't seen yet in this either tournament or in this series?
I mean, I'll keep banging the drum for Rise. I mean, I think it's a really big one that people aren't really understanding, because like it is such a strong comp to tempo into, and right, we don't really have a lot of those in the meta, right? Like in these games right now, right? Because I feel like a lot of people are trying to play for these incredibly high caps. It's a great spoiler combo as well, because you spike so easily. You can stamp any item in the game, and something that I have been missing a lot of, David. Where are the guard breakers? Like seriously though, I understand that belt is a incredible component that you need to use for a lot of other options, but like it's such a powerful item.
And we're going to look at the STC player predictions to see who the audience thinks will be the victor. And looks like the audience, the customer is always right. Vitality winning the game 1, winning the predictions as well. No surprise, we have, I think, a lot of powerhouse players in terms of their skill in TFT, but also their influence on the game as a whole, in terms of its growth, in terms of its sustainability on Twitch, for example. Soju, Setsuko, Milk, I think. Unique faces when it comes to, influencers in TFT, when it comes to being both content creators, but also fantastic TFT players, as we saw here. Especially Soju. I loved his Cassidy game plan. I love the high tempo, not trying to fish for BIS, instead just slamming anything he's given, which I think is absolutely correct. I think we even saw a spark on a Kali at some point, which I think is definitely not a traditional build, but they're stats. It works out. It makes you win rounds in stage 3 and 4, and this is what matters most in a 4v4 format. We are loading in to game number 2. Karmine Corp has one singular mission: stay alive in this series, try and come back into this game, brush off any fatigue they might have. This is, of course, very late into this day 1. These players have been watching all the other teams, potentially learning from the successes and from their mistakes, but they have to clutch up now. They have to wake up, stay active mentally.
And if you are Karmine Corp here, you go for the higher variance option of the support animals. A ton of lines could open up, and obviously not as many as the artifact lines, but I think that's something you need to keep in mind.
I have a question. Are we going to see Vampiric Scepter, Warwick? I'm ready.
Does that fall under the support animal category?
It does not, but I want to see it anyway, Guido. With Golden Prelude, there's an option to see an artifact anvil at the very beginning, and this is the one comp I got to play one time on PvE. I won't spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it just yet.
And I think that's something we need to talk about, right? Because some of those niche lines opening up, and the corrupt Vampiric Scepter is an item that, historically speaking, for the ones that has been in the game, really opens up some very niche things. But the issue is that there are very few units outside of those units that really make great use of it, that actually can hold and like not grieve himself totally.
We really haven't seen much Mogul's Mail on broadcast throughout the day. I'm very surprised. All my ladder games, I see at least one player with Mogul's Mail every time going Fast 9.
But the issue is as well, right, because of the fact you can much easier sack stuff up here, it's a possibility for the enemy team to just like completely sack off and like not give you any value from that Mogul Smell as well. Like it's it's real difficult to kind of pull off, but
even if you don't farm 50 gold, I still think it's a good game plan. I think it's a good item to have on a Nunu, Sweet Tooth Nunu, on a Wukong, for example, if you're playing down the Preserver line with Syndra or with Jinx, which we saw a little bit of earlier today. All in all, Syndra has been found for Cambiz, doesn't really have the item components for it just yet.
And speaking of components, right, it's very important to note that very often you need another tank item alongside the Mogul's Mail to really make it work. And maybe the times they've been offered, they've only had the offensive items to really go with it.
For any viewers at home wondering, is Syndra a tank? What is she doing in the front line? A little tech for you if you somehow have been living under a rock and aren't aware already. You want to have Syndra on the front line in these PvE rounds because as she takes damage, she gets more mana, she's able to cast a little bit more often. It's a very small thing, but you know, when you win these fights by a sliver of health, when you get that extra cast off and it does enough damage, it matters. Yeah,
we're going to get into these now. And the Mogul Camel, not one of the powerful hero augments. I played a couple of times at PvE, didn't find great success with it. Then I looked at the stats, I looked at everyone's tier list, and I'm like, okay, I can kind of understand this. It is very, very difficult to kind of make work, but maybe in this scenario, we know that the KC cousins themselves are great at these really niche reroll lines.
Cambiz was thinking, do I want to pick Unified Resistance? It's not a strong augment in the early stages of the game. The math simply does not add up. You don't have enough units to get maximum value from it, but it does scale well as a combat augment later on. And look, the caster blessing powers come through. We see Mogul's Mail, but as you mentioned, there maybe aren't the right items for it right now. And you do have the upgrade on the Zoe. Instead, it will be Gambler's Blade into potentially a Syndra line somewhere in this stage 2 or stage 3.
And the very big thing to note here as well, that you could make the adaptive helm as a pretty solid item in the early game, but then for frontline purposes, you would be killing off the tier here. But again, if you're going towards this line now, going into like Karma, it's a very powerful item on the likes of Karma here. Someone really doesn't need to auto attack to get her ability off. So really, really powerful slam here. I like the intent coming through from the likes of Satsuko here saying, I'm going to play for the streak.
And we see the flexible from Dark Hydra. We've seen it picked many, many times today, simply because if everything works out, it's one of the highest cap augments in the game with Arcana, emblem especially. And for what jungler, he finds a few upgrades here. He has to be thinking, what do I want to play right now? You know what? I'll play everything. I'm playing build different. You don't want to play traits here. You just want to play upgraded units. Some units that scale with attack speed better than others. This opens him up as one of the flexible players. He can play really anything. He can't really be griefed or contested in stage 4, but it's a tricky game plan. You have to find those upgrades on the forecast, especially similar to Karma, or you're in big trouble.
Yeah, we kind of saw this as well earlier today in the Weibo series as well. We saw people going in for this here as well. And a point we kind of raised then was the fact that you're a very efficient spoiler player as well. You find an early Kassadin, you know what, get it on the board. You find the early Jinx or the early Kog'Maw, get it on the board, right? So you can play whatever you want to here. And sure, you might not be able to play for that high cap you're talking about, but you are throwing a massive spanner into the work of the enemy team most of the time.
Setsuko got a win on his first matchup. Doesn't get one now off of that Zoe. It's Wet Jungler instead. With build different, you are expected to win your fights in stage 2. If you don't, something's already been going wrong considering you have so much extra stats compared to most of the other players.
All right, I have a bit of a story time here, David. Yesterday, 2 days ago actually, I played a game where I tempoed a Soraka free into Nora.
No.
I'm just saying.
Negative. It's not happening, Wida. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying.
I want to blame you. I'm not sure what rank you were doing this in, but it's not happening on an EWC TFT stage in a game between Toronto, Tokyo, and Carmine Corp.
I'll play double once this season, okay? I'll wear that favor, but we can see right now the Soraka is not a powerful unit in the imagination here. So I like the fact that we are seeing precautions being taken here, moving that Rageblade onto the Kog'Maw as that temporary character, as you've been talking about.
Could be temporary, could be the final choice. We have seen some amount of Kog'Maw with Rageblade. It works to some extent. It's not BIS, I would say, in terms of the stats, but it can definitely work out.
And another thing worth noting here as well is the fact that with the replication coming through here for Toronto, he got access to Declaw by the nature of the cloaks, right? So we'll now also have half of a Gang on Stoneplate. So his frontline items are already taken care of. You can start really heavily prioritizing those backline items and getting them online.
It looks like Toronto Tokyo will once again be the player going for Kog'Maw this game, potentially. We did see that the first emblem from Flexible the augment for Dark Hydra is the Honeymancy emblem, so this could be Hydra, at least for the first few stages, playing around 5 Honeymancer and playing around Kog'Maw as well, potentially just Ziggs or Vigar. We did see a Syndra on this carousel. And there's a Vex as well with a Cloak, a good combination of units and components. Looks like Cam is reluctantly taking it.
Yeah, and that's something you gotta keep in mind here as well. Now looking into the likes of a plenitude of rods on the bench here. And for Double 61, we have seen this plenty of time from him. The full-on open forward playstyle, something that really came out of the French scene. I think that we saw him have great success with. Potter Bold that was playing on the branching out here as well. We have seen him with this combination plenty of times as well. And Double, when he came up as a player, he came up when we had the Carousel still at the opening of the game. Going for the glove, and then like just fully flexing around everything. He's one of the most flexible players in the game, period.
Double, there's no more fortune. Are you aware, buddy? You sure you want to open forward like this? I think he will be playing into the Syndra line. It looked like he had a half a Nashers, had half a Rageblade, two rods really, so that could go either way. But right away we see BIS Syndra, Shojin, Nashers. For Milk, the positioning not ideal. The Zig's gonna be able to get a big, oh, never mind. The slight sidestep and just not quite enough damage, which swings the fight. Maybe it was already gonna be a win for Milk, but definitely gets a lot of extra HP onto a jungler taking a bigger hit.
It's also worth noting here, I kind of want to figure out like how aggressively Milk is rolling with the trade sector, because now with the system changes, you're able to keep those rerolls stocked up here. We can see now Toronto slams that Deathblade. David, are we seeing a tempo line into the likes of like a Varus or a Callista here?
I think this still could be Kog'Maw. Similar like we saw, you know, the Kassadin line from Soju really working out without necessarily BIS. I think it's a similar line for Kog'Maw. I think players are really starting to adapt to what 4v4 means and how important it is to preserve HP, either through losing HP in Stage 2 to guarantee your stability in Stage 3, off of having more gold, having better components from Carousels, playing into Syndra, or finding the best optimal line for the components and units you're given in Stage 2, and tempoing off of that by slamming items, not going for BIS.
Also another thing to worth noting here with the positioning, the second that this Warwick falls down here, we will have open lines for the Beast to kind of go in towards the backline. You can see the Kog'Maw getting graced by that Bee coming through.
The Zig so big here, the positioning matters so much. Can the Jinx clean up the Warwick? Can the Zig clean up by himself? Looks like that isn't going to be the case. A big win for Wet Jungler. Another time that a Vitality player loses their streak. So pretty much a mixed bag of streaks all around. It's only Double, who was, of course, open forwarding with the Metabolic, that gets that 5 loss streak and gets that extra bit of economy. Yeah,
it's also worth noting, right, that the last few times we've seen 4v4 in a tournament situation, it was with the old streaking system, right? So breaking a 4 streak is so impactful because you don't get that extra goal coming through until that 5 streak coming in there. So really limiting that team economy off on the side of Team Vitality here. We can see Double 61, by the nature of the open board, the only player with a full-on streak going on right now.
And let's see for Hydra, if he wants to commit to an AD line with Kog'Maw. We'll have to see what his next emblem is from Flexible coming into this Stage 3. And that could really dictate, you know, how high roll this game might be and his direction for the unit he'll be holding. A little sidestep, and it's back to multi-strikers, baby. Honeymancers, multi-strikers, my favorite comp in the game.
But that's kind of the nature of the flexible augment. You gotta be able to play with what you've been given here. And the multi-striker 1 does open up some interesting late-game situations as well. Right? Keep in mind, Callista could be a carry that these players would be vying for. So I'm excited to see what's going.
The synergies between the different trades and start trying to make connections to find boards you can build. This is what the augment is called, flexible. For that same reason, of course, we have Hecarim and the Nunu, the bridge between the Honeymancers and the multi-strikers with the Bastion, for example, and you can start building a comp off of that.
You can even do something like the fact of going into something like the Galio, Kassadin, that way around into the multi-strikers. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about this set is the trade web. It feels very flexible. It feels like you can make great use of the likes of a flexible.
And the Syndra gets the kill. 4 loss streak now for Dark Hydra. Double Dark Hydra in trouble here. They have to find ways to stabilize in Stage 3, or even if you get strong in Stage 4, it might be too little too late if you've lost too much HP in the process. Gold augments all around for the 3-2 augment pickup, and so much gold here for Double 61. Finally, we'll be seeing what he'll be committing to. He has an interesting combination of components. This is, you know, it's strange. There's 2 Wukongs for now. It could just be a flex game plan, going to something like Karma, for example, with a blue buff, with the Rabadons, with half of a, you know, tank component.
I'm gonna make an outrageous claim here, David. This could be Jinx.
It could be Jinx, yeah, of course. You have Rageblade, you have maybe Redemption for Wukong, for example.
Which in my opinion is the most important item for Wukong, just because you need that damage reduction and the healing to really make the best use of the likes of the Stone Plate, etc.
You want a Guard Breaker, you got it. Milk has built a Guard Breaker onto a Syndra, trying to, again, defend that win streak. It's all about, if you're preserving a win streak, you play tempo, you don't slam BIS, you slam whatever you're given, and just try and continue the win streak and stay healthy and get more and more gold for your just future game plan.
Yeah, and I will say, like, historically speaking, the player that really opened my eyes to the likes of the Guard Breaker was Alana. And Alana is one of the premier practice partners back in the past when Dark Hydra had his set-winning run. So, like, it's a player that, you know, has had some sort of influence on the people playing in the game. Obviously, it's on the NA side we see the Guard Breaker being slammed here, but I do think it's worth noting that it is an item that really has a lot of power, because, again, think about the likes of Cassidy, shielding coming out left, right, and center. You really get that damage amplification rolling all the time.
What jungler gets a loss now, finally, built different. Maybe has done enough for him for this early game. For what jungler, we'll go back to him really at 4-2 once he rolls down level 8, and we'll see what forecast he's able to find. For Soju,
yeah, it's a real spot.
What's going on this board? Is that a Gwen 2
yep.
on level 6?
So I feel like something that we have, the two of us haven't really touched on.
Please, hello, what's going on here?
There's something that the two of us really haven't touched too much about there, right? It's the fact that players are super willing to roll on 3-2. Again, something that's kind of been absent for a few sets, really came back last set. And we're seeing people like really being able to full on sacrifice their economy just to get that stage 3 action going on here. And even so important in the matchup, like in a format like this, right, where you can like, do a ton of damage with being a high tempo player.
And similar to Olaf, you don't see much Gwen really popping off in stage 4. Stage 3, though, this is where these units are able to bully the competition. The 1 cost, the 2 cost, they don't stand a chance against these units like the Gwen, like the Olaf, that really, when there's not much resistances, many stats to work through, they're just able to chew through everything very quickly.
Yeah, and also it's kind of worth noting that people have been struggling to find the correct item set for Gwen all throughout the set so far, because she is a scaling champion within the fights. So the initial items, it was like something like JG, Hand of Justice, and Spark. Now we saw people kind of lean in towards the Nash's too. There are so many different ways of building her. I think we're like still lacking the correct option. But look at the way Doppel has been bouncing off that Fiora.
Heads up from Dark Hydra, picks up the bow, denies the Rageblade for Setsuko onto that Gambler's Blade, Adaptive Helm, Syndra game plan. So not sure if Dark Hydra just wanted the bow anyway, but either way, a great pickup.
Yeah, Hydra is on one of the plans here that could really make great use of a Rageblade. With the multi-striker emblem leans onto the BIS item set of the Callista. So a two-fold pickup there as well, and it's really exciting to see how that's going to work here. Could we see a vertical witchcraft game come through from the like of Doppel? I feel like he's the type of player that can pull it off, but again, he doesn't have the tempo spot for it. But
without the emblem, I think there's not really a vertical witchcraft that can really, you know, survive the reroll meta in stage 4.
Let me hope a little bit, David. Right? You know, like let me live a little bit.
I think this will be more of just the Karma flex roll down on 4-2, and hope that you hit enough 2 stars to stay relevant and stay active. We saw from Milk, similar game plan. You have to really be able to play flexibly and play around anything you're hitting and adapting to really all 4 costs.
And something we haven't really spoken too much about either as well is the issue that you're holding so many units to kind of grief your opponents that those very complicated 4-2 roll downs gets an additional level of stress, which you need to figure out, like, what can I sell to buy the space for these pairs that I might not be able to upgrade and stuff like that. So there is an added check here coming through, and now we see Milk streak being broken by Canvas. Yet again, one of these big streaks being broken on the side of Vitality.
Canvas, very different game to what we saw from him in that game number 1. This time playing multi-strikers. Canvas and me have a bit of a feud on EUS because we contest each other on Cassidy so often. And this time Canvas, I'm not in your lobby. You can do what you want. And it looks like he is finding a lot of success. In this case around, has the half Rageblade already built here, hoping to really benefit greatly in stage 4 off of the combat augment he's set up already with the Unified, especially now finding much more value.
But David, you kind of spoke with me about the importance of like you really liking this second row Cassidy here, but
this is my perfect positioning in my opinion.
Yeah.
You have the Shen on the sidelines, stunning potentially the backline units. You have the Akali almost always jumping into where Cassidy's target is and helping focus down one side and then wrap around onto the left side of the backline in most cases. And of course you can just switch sides as you need to last second to try and fool your opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's all great, like, especially when you put so much time into the composition here. So obviously the players themselves will notice because they've been putting a whole amount of numbers into this game so far. But like, look at this. Dark Hydra now is going to get another emblem here in just a second. And that's a big thing to keep in mind there because, again, this could throw his entire game plan for yet another spin.
We were hyping up so much a different combination between Honeymancers and Multi-Strikers, and Dark Hydra said, you know what?
What is the
leave me alone,
worst
buddy.
emblem you could get here, David? Let's do some Fiora crafting for a second.
I'm trying to hype up Karmine Corp forcing a game 3, so let's not do that. Let's try and hope for an Arcana
if we talk about it, it's not going to happen, okay? So, like, Arcana would be the worst one here. So what you're saying, obviously, you're not in the spot to play that high cap right now. Good technical play here as well from Dark Hydra, holding on here.
Oh, there it is.
No,
the Arcana emblem has been found. Not
fine.
a win condition maybe in and of itself, but definitely moving in the right direction after the Honeymancer multi-striker combination. Looks like the caster blessings from the biased EMEA casters coming in clutch to try and give you, the viewers, some more TFT entertainment, maybe a game 3 in the books.
A couple of interesting things here about this itemization from Double coming out, right? He had access to a very early Morello, has opted for the red buff instead here now. So the last item is going to be super interesting here. I assume we're going to see an Ionic Spark Slam in the front line as well as we're going to see a Bloodthirster come through as well. Here could be an option moving on towards that Fiora 2 further down the road, or we're just going to commit to the Wukong being a primary frontliner for now.
If you have the choice, I think red buff is always a better item to build for Karma. It kills a bow, which is not helpful at all when it comes to tank items. And in this case, with a BT slammed on Wukong, you know that Double is desperate for more tank itemization to try and find a front line that matches the back line you have with the 3-item Karma.
Another set.
Spellblades is here, not for Zoe, but for Karma. We see the instant roll left in the middle. Don't have to waste any more time. Karma is online.
Another interesting thing to note about this board as well, David, right? You're looking at the Brier, a unit that has been very discussed here. How good is Brier actually? And you kind of spoke to me about this a couple of days ago, that you didn't believe in the unit until you saw Alan bring it out on stream. Kind of like talk us through like what do you need to make Brier work in this meta?
You need a Brier 2, you need Nasus 2, you need 4 Shapeshifters, and you need good items for Brier. I think she's a little bit underlooked. If you don't build for her correctly, if you don't have the right combat augments especially, she doesn't do too much, but just in terms of CC, she's very valuable. And again, it really depends on your augments, your items, the units you're hitting the roll down, but it's part of that puzzle. If you just immediately write off Brier as an option, there are some games that you're losing out on some optimization in terms of finding a stronger board than others. Galio 3 has been found by Milk, the Syndra 2 with perfect itemization. The Cassidans being held to deny that game plan from Cambiz, who is still streaking, cosplaying K3 Soju from game 1, casted into a massive win streak throughout stages 3 and 4.
And it does seem like we are going to be seeing that Kog'Maw do a ton of work on that other board here, breaking the streak of Cambiz in just a second. So that is going to be a big one for the economy of this game so far. Look towards the bottom of the table, David. Where Jungle, Double 61 and Dark Hydra haven't found their way away from that just yet.
And it seems like players are just copying the game plans from the opposing teams in game 1. We saw a very similar spot from Milk, playing into the Karma line, losing a lot of HP, coming to stage 4, then finding the upgrade, and then stabilizing and streaking all the way into the end of stage 5.
Yeah, so now we can kind of see why Dark Hydra has been struggling here, has been forced to go in towards the likes of the Varus I was talking about a little bit earlier on. And again, Rageblade not necessarily the greatest item on him, really want to have that heavy AD load to do a ton of burst with that ultimate.
And we're seeing now if the Arcana emblem signifier on the Castellan will be enough to make this comp work. The Camille reset similar to Olaf and Gwen feasting on units in stage 3. Camille can do the same in stage 4 until everything's upgraded, until everything is locked and loaded for tanks, especially we see there a lot of work being done by Camille, and Varus enjoying his maybe very small amount of time in the spotlight in this game too.
Yeah, big win here again against K3 Soju as well. By one of the players you need to kind of push in towards that bottom 4 to open up the variety of win conditions here. Brier on the Carousel, Karma with a rod as well, being blocked off by Setsuko.
And Dark Hydra did not want the Karma. He wanted to make Setsuko believe he wanted the Karma, so Setsuko takes it, and if he doesn't take it, Hydra would protect it for Double, who can then find the Karma to upgrade, which he desperately needs to stabilize. It's a 3-win streak for Double right now, so it is going similar to Milk game plan in game 1. It is still a Karma 1 though for Double. It's still just that Wukong 2. I'm curious, did Double find a tank component here to help the Wukong out? He found a TG, which is kind of similar. It does buy more time for the Karma to the borrow time from the Karma, and he gets a decoy here for the Wukong.
Yeah, a nice little one-round spike here, but the big issue as well for Double is where does this TG go, right? Because You're stuck on a pair of Fiora, but if you don't find that, you'd rather have the TG on the likes of the Camille, potentially, right? There's so many different ways for this one to go for now.
No Rakan, no Morgana. You don't have a spot for the Preservers. You're playing instead more just generically good units by themselves, like the Fiora, the Gwen, the Brier. But all in all, not the best spot just yet for double. I think he's halfway there.
A ball we haven't seen a lot of today as well, David, is the multi-striker alongside the Fiora. This very heavy AD-centric line here. That's what Toronto Tokyo was going into. And I was kind of thinking about talking about it earlier on, but I didn't believe it was going to go down this route.
And the Giga Chad Mordekaiser sneaks into the backline, takes down Kalista, Setsuko, trades some HP with one of his teammates, and stays a little bit healthier. Dark Hydra is the player to watch, though, now on a win streak as well. Double on a 4-win streak, so the players who, again, griefed their early game, lost a lot of HP, are finding their way back into the game.
And this game, Wed Jungler has that Karma too, ever so lacking in the previous game. So a bunch of game plans open up now, can be stable here along with that build. Different. Got the reinforcements here, really bringing it out as like the reason probably why there's a Karma too, right? But when you have BD, when you do have even more combat power coming through from that Spellblade, right? You do have so much power coming in here.
So that means that 2 players from Karmine Corp are playing for Karma. Both players have to find their Karma 2, that's 6 copies, so it makes it a tiny bit harder. It is a bit of a contest, I think something that you can't really do much about, considering the items that dropped for double in stage 3. With the blue buff, he kind of had to go into Karma, and of course the Spellblades for Wed Jungler with the build different means that he had to go for Karma as well. Is Karma going to be good enough here? It looks like it's not going to be enough for a win, but still, Wed Jungler relatively healthy. Canvas is back on a win streak after getting that small loss to the Kog'Maw player earlier in stage 4.
It's also worth noting, right, this is a scenario that most teams are prepared for. The double Karma contest on their own team is a scenario everyone knows how to play around. It's very common and it's not a surprise.
If you've played ladder before 2-cost reroll became the name of the game, I think you can test with Karma 7 away. So two players on Karma, it's fine. You'll make it out.
I will say, at my day 1, I was playing Karma and Rise combined, and like no one else was playing Karma in my games. People hadn't caught on to how good the unit was. And then like day 3, I was like, I'm contested every game. Like, and it's kind of fun to see like how quickly those metas will develop. And I'm super excited to see whether or not over the course of this weekend, David, if you're going to see any big major meta developments coming out as the teams will be showing tech.
We don't see a roll down from Soju. He is leveling to 8, so playing a tempo Tristana board instead. I think a lot of this comes down to the Gwen 2 he found early, completely changed his game plan, showing the flexibility that Soju has as a player. We saw the 2-cost reroll played to perfection with Cassidy in game 1. In this case, wanted to do the same with Kog'Maw, the other meta 2-cost reroll, but the game said, hey, here's a Gwen 2. Play around it, you'll be rewarded. That's the case.
Yeah, you got to figure out when that's like a fake high roll. And you got to figure out when it's the actual high roll, because that's a very important skill to kind of figure out when you're like in a game like TFT. Like, when are you being thrown for a loop by the game? We saw it in game 1 with Canvas with the Vigar blocks in the early game, right? And like this time around, he's like, this is an absolute big spike for Soju.
Now, does Syndra punish Soju here? Does this take on the Gwen before she can do too much? This is a problem with Gwen. She's a beast stage 3, stage 4, she gets herself into trouble. And Tristana 2, because you leveled up, might not be enough. In this case, Soju now, he was the hero in game number 1. Maybe going to be the 0 in game number 2. Very similar to what we saw from Bintum, for example. But Dark Hydra, a little bit too flexible for my liking. I think for any EMEA fans' liking, considering he's now down to 7 HP. With, I think, a slightly awkward assortment of emblems he was given outside of the Arcana.
Yeah, but it's a very interesting thing to kind of figure out here, right? Because we can see Soju on a 5 loss streak, Hydra only on a 1 loss streak here. So has Hydra cycled through all of his good matchups, or has Soju just hit no good matchups?
Ooh, we're on double Arcana now. It's still the Smolder and the Varus, though. Playing off meta. Will Dark Hydra be rewarded? The matchmaking so important here. Will be Soju versus Wed Jungler with the Karma board with the build different. Dark Hydra versus Milk. We just saw Milk beat Soju. Can he beat Dark Hydra again? Is Milk the bully to the bottom of the HP standings? We'll have to find out as Smolder tries his best. Arcana, Xerath cast. All the extra damage coming in, but is it going to be enough? The Varus and the Smolder not doing enough. The Varus does not come through. Dark Hydra taken down. Is Soju down as well? He is. Is it a bigger loss? I think it is. Soju is going to be -5, 1 HP difference. Vitality takes the 8th.
And it's a deja vu, David. We saw this exact scenario in game number 1 here. And now the big question is the Carmine Corp team in a better position to really figure out a better game plan, lock out these Vitality players? Looking at the HP pools in the standings right now, it is very close overall. But Setsuko's looking like he's going to be a strong ace here. Double, obviously a fantastic ace with his early open forward game plan. But what does Milk, TT, Wet Jungle, and Carousel have on the table?
I would personally give an extra point in the standings to both Dark Hydra and Soju for itemizing and playing Gwen, Varus, and Smolder as their carries. Definitely helping out the bingo sheets of our viewers at home, making sure all units in TFT set 12 have their time in the spotlight.
Like we see here now, Toronto really, again, as I was talking about earlier, I didn't expect to see this plan come out because it's something that has
Look at the Brier, this is what I'm talking about. Brier can be a beast in the right setup. She can offer a lot in terms of utility, especially people see her as a hyper carry, but sometimes she can actually be an absolute beast. We'll see if it'll be enough here. Very, very close fight. This is what you want when you're playing your teammate. A small loss one way or the other.
And another thing we didn't really speak much about, like Camille CC, the lock coming in here, almost winning the fight as well. So really big deal here. Now the Pyro Emblem no longer an offer. We have no portal players on the alarm, so the portal will not be anything amazing either. But for Campus here, he's blocking off that Camille here with the QSS. A great item in the late game with the amount of CC ramping in.
Vitality looks like they're trying to say, hey, stop the count. We have 2 more players from Karmine Corp in the bottom 4 right now. Wet Jungler and Cambiz. Potentially 1 life for Cambiz. Wet Jungler 17 HP should be fine for stage 5. But these players have to start spiking if they want to put their team back in business when it comes to trying to force a game 3. And looking at Setsuko, he's on a 5-win streak. Looking at Cambiz, despite a very strong early game, no casted in 3 because everyone else was holding. Now pivots into Camille. It's a Camille 1. You're, again, trying to high roll the Camille 2 on level 8. Is that going to be enough of an option? We just have 2 units that are not quite upgraded just yet. And this is why we're seeing a 3-loss streak from Cambiz.
Yeah, and these are our main carries as well here, right? And that's a big deal. It's going to be a fight against Double here, so any positioning things that have been done differently?
Double did not. I think he possibly used the salvage to remove the items on his carry and has only built the blue buff on the Karma, trying to make this a small enough loss. It will be, I think, a pretty big loss in the end regardless, but at the very least, Cambiz stays alive, which is what is most important here.
And he has the metabolic accelerator as well to heal back up. We know that Double is one of the strongest players in the lobby.
Could have killed 2 more units there, would have been great for the total HP for Karmine Corp, but regardless, Double currently second in the standings, 37 HP to work with, just 2 off of Milk.
Yeah, now Wet Jungler, though, the next on the chopping block here. That's a big deal to kind of keep in mind as well, that is something that we have to pay attention to. We do see my boy Rice kind of showing up here. And the thing about this board, David, that I'm very experienced with it, it's a very strong top 4, top 3 board. It's not a board that you're going to go and say, you know what, I'm going to get that first place finish here. But again, it is built different. It has been scaling in. That extra attack speed might do a ton of work.
If you're built different, if you're wondering, this is the way to play it in set 12 Magic and Mayhem. You want to go into AP, there are just better attack speed scaling AP units right now, with Varus not really being the absolute demon that he will be maybe potentially later on in the set once the next few patches come through. For now, Ryze is the unit you want, and Nami without items is good because you want to have that extra bit of CC, but all of a sudden the positioning really not ideal here. I think that's going to be end of the road for Wet Jungler. Karma taken down very early. Brier, Setsuko really showcasing why Brier is a fit on this board for so many players when they're playing around this flexible game plan. Wet Jungler and Cambiz ended up 5th and 6th, Dark Hydra 7th. That's the end of the series. Vitality, a dominant showing. 2-0 for Team Soju, Milk, Setsuko, Toronto, Tokyo. Showing they mean business.
Can't Double win out?
Double can't win out. There's 3 players from Karmine Corp in the bottom 4. It doesn't matter. There's 3 players. If there's 3 players in the bottom 4, the math is done. It's over.
Yeah, Cassis and math have been a great combination here, but again, just showcasing why we've been talking about this Vitality team as one of the teams with the highest cap if all of the players are locked in, and very rarely have this set of players been locked in at the same time competitively in that America circuit here. So really showing them all firing on these cylinders. It's an absolutely amazing showcasing of just like how strong this Vitality team can be.
And could this be kind of a misstep in the game plan for Karmine Corp in this game too? Playing maybe a little bit too flexibly. Dark Hydra onto the flexible augment. Didn't have the best setup until the end. It was too little, too late. 2 players on Karma Flex. In one case, it was of course built different for what jungler, not going into the meta reroll lines as often as it did in game 1. In this case, the opposite we saw from most of the players from Vitality. We saw the Kog'Maw 2 games in a row. We saw the Kassadin very often as well. So all in all, a great showcase from Vitality. From Carmine Corp, the next question I have is it possibly a problem of the language barrier? Is it the combination of France and Germany that has never been seen before really in EMEA, a problem when it comes to communicating rapidly and efficiently in a Team 4v4 format?
Yeah, it's also worth noting, right, that the Vitality team has been really locked in due to that bootcamp that have been going on, right? A incredibly strong team that has really dedicated themselves. Like, as I was kind of joking with Soju about doing a content media day yesterday, it's like the first sighting of Soju in like what feels like over a month, just because they've been so hard locked in on this EWC prep.
When someone like Soju locks in this hard for tournaments and gives up the I think one of the most exciting moments in TFT as a content creator, which is the start of a set where you're learning all the new units, climbing the ladder, trying to grind infinite games, which is I think what players like Milk and Tetsugo and Soju are known for, to really lock into a tournament like this. I think it showcases how important this tournament is for all of our players. It's very rare to have literally the best players from every region when it comes to making it to Worlds and doing well, coming into a LAN event like this, all coming in person, and especially the start of the set, where being creative is rewarded, where trying to figure out a set in 1 week is rewarded. I think it's a special moment as a competitor for all these players, and it showcases for Team Vitality.
Yeah, and also at the end of day 1 here, we get to see one of the most powerful item combinations at work here. The Blighting Jewel on the Karma. One of the biggest lines opened up by the artifact, if it wasn't for the fact that Karma is pretty much, you know, an open line for anyone to kind of go down.
And it is, you know, a Syndra 3 doing most of the work here. Karma is just trying to, you know, tag some units, say, hey, I'm Karma, I'm still here, I'm doing some damage. Really for Blighting Jewel, just as an extra little insight, I think it's the one time that for Chrono Karma, if you have the right upgrade with Camille 2, makes a lot of sense, where you have that extra time to buy, and it really elevates the Karma, which is kind of living on borrowed time, where she has that much more time to scale the Blighting Jewel damage.
Yeah, and I'm kind of excited to see whether or not we are going to be seeing a bunch of portable forges coming out over the course of the week as like the first augment being picked up as well, right? Because there are some really interesting lines, like something like Mittens, for example, can be a super powerful tool for a lot of these melee units, really buy them some time, but as we do see that Double 61 has been eliminated from the game here, so now it's just the sheer formalities as the game has been finished here, David. Absolutely amazing showcase here and a dominant 2-0 victory for Vitality.
Maybe not as close of a series as we expected. I thought this would be similar to T1 versus Weibo in that second series of the day. Kind of the mirrored showdown from